Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 State of the Shell. I'm Joey Aiello, and I'm joined here by technical fellow and PowerShell inventor Jeffrey Snover. How are you doing today, Jeffrey?
I'm fantastic. How about you, Joey?
I'm doing wonderful. I can't wait to show off all the awesome stuff we've been working on. I'm really excited to be back here, obviously in a virtual capacity, but for the PowerShell DevOps and Global Summit 2021, it's so nice to be back in business here.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't wait to do this again next year when maybe we can all be in person. But we had such a great year. Can't wait to tell people about it. So,
Absolutely.
So slides.
Let's get into it. Yeah, we're just going to go ahead and get this deck thrown up here. Here we are. State of the Shell 2021.
Hoo-ha. Okay, well, let me take control here a second. So are we there yet? You know, Joey, when we were doing, you weren't around at the time, but we had just finished PowerShell version 2 and shipped it, and we're beginning planning for PowerShell version 3. And one of the execs is like, PowerShell version 3? What the heck are you doing that for? Aren't we done with that thing? And so, I think one of the questions is, hey, we've been working on this for about 20 years. Are we there yet? Like, is there any more juice left in the squeeze? And the answer is absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, there's a lot more juice left in the squeeze. I like to joke about Lee, Lee Holmes, right? I say, well, Lee's like the consummate hacker, like in the good MIT sense of the word, right? And that, if you give that guy some WD-40 and some duct tape, he can solve any problem in the world, right? But it requires a lot of energy, right? But if you gave him a wrench, he could solve any problem in the world, and it'll be a little bit easier. And then if you gave him a saw, same thing. So with PowerShell version 3, right, you could do everything you could do with PowerShell version 3, you could do with PowerShell version 1. It just required a lot more energy. And, it's one of those things, I don't know if I've talked to you about this, but one of the things that has really been forming my concept of the computing industry in large, and just simplifies everything, is this idea of energy per answer. How much energy does it take to produce an answer? How much human energy does it take to achieve a result? And then how much computational energy does it require to do that?
I like
And
that.
I think when you pull on that thread, everything becomes simpler. And so what you see is through each subsequent version, version 7, when we went cross-platform, all of a sudden there were things you could do, like run it on Linux, that you couldn't do before. But on Windows, there's nothing you can't do with version 7 that you couldn't do with PowerShell version 1, just required a lot more energy. So what are we going to talk about?
Yeah, so, like you said, it's all about making things easier. And to that end, we're going to be talking about PowerShell 7, the journey that we kind of went through to get up to this point, in simplifying and reducing that energy per answer for PowerShell customers, sort of principles that we're following that are guiding our development of PowerShell 7. Some of the data, usage data in terms of, how people are using PowerShell 7 today, and just whether or not those principles have really been met with real world experience. And then obviously the release aspect here of PowerShell 7.1 and 7.2. After that, we're going to talk a little bit about open source working groups, sort of changes in the governance of our open source projects. We'll get into a new project here, PSARM, which is a really awesome module for helping you build Azure Resource Manager templates. And then we're going to tease a little bit of the predictive IntelliSense and PS Readline improvements that are going to be presented on later in the conference. Just give you a little teaser there, and then a little bit of bonus there as well at the end that we'll save for a surprise.
Yeah, that's so much cool stuff. Yeah, so let me talk about this, Monad Manifesto, right? I'm sorry about this book. I don't know if you read, Joey, have you read the book?
I was just lamenting that I have not. I've read a couple passages from it, but I really need to set aside some time and read it because I hear it's just chock full of awesome tidbits.
It is. Don Jones reached out, and I was able to connect him with a bunch of the original PowerShell team, and he wrote the story about how PowerShell came about. We've talked about various episodes of that, but he was able to get the view from everybody to put into the book, and so it's a fantastic read. And so here I'm going to talk about the different phases of PowerShell, right? So first there was the manifesto and the previews from 2002, 2005, and I would say that what I believe is my core contribution to PowerShell was in these early days establishing a framework where we could get this collection of geniuses together and have their IQs add up, right? Bill always used to say, hey, we're great at finding really smart people and hiring them. We just suck at getting their IQs to add up. So establishing the architectural principles, the design goal, the spirit, the ethos, the culture, then we're able to bring in these awesome people. And the thing I love about the story is, about the book, is it's able to tell the stories of these geniuses and what they brought to the table in full detail. So then we shipped and we had PowerShell version 1, or that was to say Windows PowerShell version 1 and 2. And this is where we did, Windows management, and you could bridge APIs, right? You could talk to .NET, you could talk to COM, you could talk to WMI. That's the heart of PowerShell. The reason why we had to invent PowerShell was because, unlike Linux, where everything is file oriented, and if you can edit a file and restart a process, you can manage everything. In Windows, everything's behind an API. And so you needed to talk to those APIs, and you need to have the right admin abstraction for talking to APIs. And so that's what we did in PowerShell version 1 and 2.
So going back to your original analogy then, Jeffrey, these APIs are essentially your WD-40 and duct tape, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And if you've ever tried to actually do anything by talking to the WMI objects, you'll know exactly what we're talking about. Like, okay, I can do that, but what? And in fact, PowerShell version 3 was when we had that kind of critical mass. And it turns out that the bulk of those commandlets were written in WMI, right? But now all of a sudden, I can say get disk, I can say get TPM, and have these nice abstractions, but underneath the covers is all that crazy WMI stuff. Okay. And so we just, from 3 to 5 was where we just went and got critical mass, more and more coverage, more and more. So this is, I think, when we shipped, we had like 120 commandlets, but by the time we had PowerShell version 3, there were over 1,200 commandlets. So really crazy coverage. Then with PowerShell 6, this is when we use, sort of like, sometimes to go forward, you have to go backwards. So what we did was, hey, we know that we want to go forwards. We want to be cross-platform. And to do that, we had to do .NET Core. And I'll tell you, boy, the team really took one on the chin going to .NET Core. We effectively had to throw away, it was about 10 years worth of tests that we had to rewrite from scratch. I mean, that was freaking brutal. And then we had to do all this hard work because, for being honest, .NET Core, they were too courageous in their refactoring of version 1, and they got the memo and have since fixed that. But we stuck with it. There were very few people that were successful with .NET Core version 1, and we were, and that was just through pure bloody mindedness. Like
we were back to WD-40 and duct tape, right? We started over in the Linux world, and it was like we got thrust, through those doors, and here are your tools now, right? So
no, that's exactly it. Yeah, right. And so people used it as great as cross-platform, but on Windows it was less. And so that's why we had Windows PowerShell and you had PowerShell Core. And PowerShell Core on Windows was really less than Windows PowerShell. But then, hallelujah, PowerShell 7, right? PowerShell 7 is the one release to rule them all, right? Like Lord of the Ring, right? And this is really the release that empowers every person and organization to achieve more. So every person, that's our company mission, right? But as applied to PowerShell, it's really true. Every operating system, every cloud, every operating system that matters. We didn't port to Amiga OS, we didn't port to VMS, but the Linuxes and the Windows shells.
I do remember having a conversation early days, pre 6 alpha, where we were talking about whether AIX support was going to be important. So it's we considered everything out there.
Well, right. I remember. I think we even now run on Photon, but I remember the VMware guys saying,
VMware
"Hey,
distribution,
you want to support Photon?" I'm like, "What's a Photon? What?"
Right.
And it turns out, and they helped us with that. So
works great.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then there's Alpine. I mean, there are all these releases.
Oh, I love Alpine. I'm running that one on all my Raspberry Pis at home. It's great for that local.
Oh, is that an ARM one?
Yeah. Well, they got everything, but yeah, it's very, very tiny Alpine. Very
Fantastic.
Tiny.
Yeah, so what are our principles here? So again, PowerShell 7, empower every person and organization to achieve more, also known as manage anything, anywhere, right? So 1, cross-cloud, or on-premises. So what's that mean? So we start off, I can manage this OS. And yes, I can manage this OS or that remote OS, and whether that's Windows or Linux. But now I can manage any of the workloads, and now you can manage any of the clouds. I was so excited when we did PowerShell 6, .NET 6. Yeah, wait. When we had our launch partners were Google, AWS, and VMware. I mean, that just to me, I'm just kind of well up now thinking about it. Like, we are truly open. The fact that these people were not really what you consider traditional Microsoft friends looked at this opportunity and sort of said, "Hey, should I what?" And then they looked and was like, "Yeah, I'm in." And they were across platform. So now this tool can work AWS, Google, us, VMware, manage anything, whether it's Windows, Linux, Mac OS, no VMS. Let me know if that's a problem. Now, Windows compatibility, remember, it was less, but with 7, it's not less anymore. So there's a couple reasons for that. One is .NET 3.1. I told you they were overly courageous with their refactoring. .NET 3.1 really raised the compatibility bar. They were very, very compatible, lots of coverage for APIs that weren't there before. But then we also added something we call WPS Compat Session, which basically says, hey, if there's something that it still doesn't even run in .NET Core 3.1, or somebody hasn't done the work to say that it does, what we'll do is, like, remember I said you could run a command like get TPM, and you run it here, but it's actually running in WMI. Well, here it's the same thing. You run the commands, and what we do underneath the covers is we create a local remoting session to a PowerShell v5 version, and we run it there and have a proxy command here. So now you get just fantastic compatibility. And by the way, that's just one of those like crazy cool technologies to drill into.
Oh yeah, and I just love the fact that, for all those System32 modules, it's just magic. You don't need to know like that it's WMI under the hood, or that it's PowerShell, or that it's .NET, or that it's a native executable. Just runs because it's just PowerShell.
Yeah, that's crazy. In fact, you know what? I had problems with that this morning. I was going to show an example. I decided not to, but I was like, oh, okay, so where's a seam? And it's like, wait, oh, it's working. It's like, and then I found out, oh, well, what was happening was it was just working because underneath the covers, we automatically created that session. It's like, okay, so great for the user experience, bad when you're trying to find the seam to make a point. Anyway, and again, this is Microsoft and everyone using this technology. And again, runs on bare metal, runs in VMs, runs in containers, runs anywhere. So again, that's our mission: manage anything, anywhere. Of course, we don't do VMS, but basically, if there's some scenario that it doesn't help you manage and address, we really want to know about it because we think we're covering everything. You can't swing a cat without finding something we're supporting. And then same thing with remoting, right? So we had WinRM, right? And I don't even know if we told the story of the WinRM in the book, but there's some funny stories around that one. That was not our first choice. Let's say it that way. And so then when we went cross-platform and the world was all on the rest of the world was on SSH, we were very thrilled to have the opportunity to add SSH support to that, and the ability to access REST APIs, JSON. I don't know, am I missing something here? Joey, what's your favorite stuff?
No, I mean, it really, the REST and JSON stuff, like some of this was always there to some extent, right? Like even SSH remoting, like, I mean, 15, 20 years ago, I was downloading crazy, probably insecure builds of SSH servers to run on Windows machines. But this just, again, it just brings it all together, makes it PowerShell native, updates everything for the, the modern kind of set of semantics, right? Like things like JSON getting parsed as UTF-16 in the old world, right? Whereas, the entire world has moved on to UTF-8 without a bomb, right? And now, we just natively support that. So it's really just jumping in line with all these other standards across all these other platforms and making sure that, we just fit seamlessly, going back to your seams, seamlessly in with the rest of the world.
It's awesome. And it's one thing that, kind of really get in focus here. Like, oh, hey, how much money, how much revenue, what were the sales of PowerShell last year? So do you remember what the sales for PowerShell? Zero. What were our revenues the year before that? Okay, so we've been investing in this for 20 years and our net revenue is zero, right? So what's that about? And the answer is, we were given a gift. We were given a gift. We were given the gift of having a mission to just go do whatever it takes to make our customers successful. Like, look, if customers, Satya said it, look, if customers are being successful, we'll be able to monetize that. If they're not successful, it's really hard to monetize. So we took the philosophy that said, hey, people want to use our products. They want to buy and use our products, but they're limited. They're rate limited in the amount that they can buy because it's so hard to get anything done.
So it's that energy per answers, right? Like
energy per answer. Exactly. And so that's why we took on this, like, hey, let's make this super easy to do. And so that's why, I don't know, Joey, how many people realize this, but this was the team that did the OpenSSH port to Windows. Because again, it's like, hey, there's this community and that community. Why do you have a Windows team and then a Linux team? Like that makes no sense. Why can't you all have just one tool? Why can't you do remoting from one environment to the other? So this team advocated it and did all the heavy. We did all the heavy lifting for .NET Core. We did all the heavy lifting to do some of the first open source contributions and some of the first open source software in Windows. So, and again, all because we're focused in on trying to make you successful. So anyway, I just love that mission. Really
Yeah,
do.
I can't wait for Shell of an Idea round 2 when I can tell some of the stories from trying to get SSH shipped into Windows. Those were fun times.
Indeed.
Awesome. So I want to talk a little bit about these sort of principles of PowerShell 7, right? This idea, first of all, that you should work smarter, not harder, right? Less energy per answer, less energy per task you're trying to do. And one of the things that is just so valuable in terms of doing less work is the ecosystem and community of, what's now over 8,000 modules shipping in the PowerShell gallery, right? So you can go out there with your duct tape and your WD-40 and you can go rebuild, a module that's going to allow you to interface with Excel, or a module that's going to interface, between SecretManagement and HashiCorp's Vault, right? But with the PowerShell gallery, you could just hop in there and not only download these things and leverage them in your own environment, obviously after you've done some sanity checks on whether that module is appropriate for your environment, but you can also contribute to these things, right? There's this entire community and ecosystem where in most, if a vast majority of cases, these modules are open source, they're on GitHub. People want pull requests. They want you to help fix these things, make them better, make them work with different environments and different sorts of customers, Windows and Linux. So you can get out there and just sort of hop in and contribute to this ecosystem so that people aren't duplicating efforts. Because I don't know, if you talked to folks, Jeffrey, a lot about this problem prior to the gallery, but we would go out to our MVPs and our customers and we'd find out that many of them were building the exact same modules inside of their own little enterprise silos.
Exactly.
And
Over and over again.
And it just such a waste of effort, right?
Yeah, the other thing, Joey, is a lot of people will ask, "Oh, how do I get started in PowerShell?" Read PowerShell month of lunches, or watch some videos. But in reality, one of the best ways to do this is to go find some problem that you have, find it on the gallery, and then look at the code. Look at the code, like, hey, that's really cool. I can do this. How did they do that? And then you look at the code, and you're like, oh, that's really cool. Or, hey, that sucks. Why don't you try it this way? And then contribute back.
Exactly. And that's, I still learn this way today. I'm not out there writing a new module every time I need to accomplish something. I go to the gallery and I go, what can help me here, right? Similarly, VS Code extension, right? This is really more about tooling in general, but the VS Code extension does so much stuff for you automatically now, right? One of my favorite things is just getting those little squigglies from Script Analyzer for best practices, right? Or throwing a snippet in there for an advanced function so that I don't have to go out to find somebody's module in the gallery and copy paste little pieces or off a Stack Overflow or whatever. I can never remember all the param syntax with the commandlet binding. It's
exactly
8 years now or whatever, and I still can't remember what it is.
So then, Joey, some people in Twitter and such had thrown rocks saying, "Oh, it's they tried it in the past and it was buggy, and that when it really got slow when you had large files."
Yeah, we've addressed a lot of those problems. There's some edge cases I think that still linger, and we're looking to address those actually over the next couple of months. But the vast majority of those issues, we had a major switch over about a year and a half ago, from a huge refactor of our extension, and a ton of those issues have been fixed. It was much larger files work better. Debugging's a lot more stable. And even things like automatically updating, right? We're able to implement those in VS Code first, where you get a little pop-up, hey, you're out of date. Click this button, and we'll get your PowerShell right back up to where it needs to be. So all these sorts of things, contribute to this sort of work smarter, not harder principle. Similarly, tab completion, IntelliSense, not just in the VS Code extension, but really anywhere you're using PowerShell, right? Even if I'm remoted into another machine, I've got all the power of IntelliSense right there in a quote unquote dumb terminal with control space, or as we'll see pretty soon, things like predictive IntelliSense that just allow you to, not have to remember every little thing about stuff you've done in the past, or stuff that others have done as best practices. So tab completion, I couldn't use PowerShell without tab completion.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, I don't know if you notice this, but every now and then, I'm using PowerShell and I'll just sort of stop and say, hey, what's going on here? Like when you're remoted into a system and you're able to do tab completion, and you're like, wait a second, so this isn't VT100, right? Where like the terminal's over there, the terminal's over here, and I'm able to do tab completion. And they sit through like, wait, what had to happen for that to be true? And you just shocking amount of hard work goes into these things that you luckily just don't even notice.
Exactly. Seamless.
Seamless.
And of course, just picking up PowerShell at all now is working smarter, not harder, right? I don't have to go roll my own Docker file or container. We ship containers. I could just go out to the Docker hub and boom. I mean, I was just saying before, I use the Alpine-based PowerShell containers to do some stuff at home, and I don't have to do anything extra. It's one command. I pull this container, I tell it to run this one script inside of that container, and I'm all done. I've got my own little hosted infrastructure, and that thing, one little cron job, and I'm pulling the latest version via that container package. Or if I'm even just in some CI platform using GitHub Actions, Azure Pipelines, there's a million third-party CI platforms out there that pick up the latest version of PowerShell 7. And you don't have to bring your own, roll your own agent, whatever. You could just throw some script in a YAML file, and you're off to the races.
And then Cloud Shell is available as a container, isn't it?
Oh, Cloud Shell. Yes, absolutely. Cloud Shell is just awesome. Whether you're using the hosted version, this is Azure Cloud Shell and the Azure
Yep.
portal, but also like you're saying, yeah, we've got a container image now for Azure Cloud Shell, which contains a ton more of the tools that are great for managing clouds that may not be there in the default PowerShell image, as well as the .NET SDK we ship in now. So if you're out there developing a .NET application, PowerShell's right there, just right next to all your .NET CLI tools. And this is PowerShell's rapidly becoming the language of choice, especially for cross-platform .NET development for testing and building, testing, and deploying .NET applications.
So cool. So cool.
Very cool. So another big principle here in PowerShell 7 is transparency, right? And openness in general. So we really, we set out when we first started this open source project to do open source, quote unquote, the right way. And I think having partners like Amazon, VMware, Google on day one really demonstrated how committed we were to this. But today, the vast majority, I mean, there are some extremely minor exceptions in terms of Microsoft compliance, but the vast majority of all the work that we do is tracked completely out in the open, right? They're in issues, in pull requests out there in the open. We publish our design specs as review for comment documents, RFCs, in the PowerShell RFC repo, and we open source pretty much everything by default, right? We don't ask ourselves, oh, is this something we should open source? We occasionally ask ourselves, is this something we can't open source for some arbitrary reason? But we're leaning into open source as the default, and that means that really you get to peek under the hood at everything we're doing. And just like all those other gallery modules, you can see and contribute to what we're working on outside of PowerShell 7. We also do a monthly PowerShell community call. We have probably only missed 2 or 3 over the last 3 or 4 years that we've been doing these. Third Thursday of every single month. Whether I'm around or not, like I think I'm going to be on vacation for the next one. They're still happening. And that's you can find more info about that at AKMS PS Community Call. But that is generally the entire PowerShell engineering team shows up for that. And lets you guys, voice your opinions. Hey, what's going on with this thing? Or, get the latest on what our releases, are packed full of. So just really an awesome opportunity to connect directly with the team outside of the normal conference circuit. People think they got to wait until these sorts of events in order to talk to us. And really, every single month we're there and we want to hear what you guys are thinking.
Yeah, exactly. So that was always one of the reasons we love going to conferences, because there we could really find out, hey, this isn't working, et cetera. And often you hear all the things that are working, great. But what really helps us is to find out where the problems are. That helps us prioritize. And so now we've got a great mechanism to do it every single month. So something's not working, you're having heartburn, come tell us about it, please.
Yes, please. And then finally, our telemetry. So we do collect a small amount of usage data when you start PowerShell, and that helps us, drives insights into things like which platforms we should support, right? If we suddenly saw, a huge spike in, people trying to get it compiled on AIX or VMS or whatever, maybe that would be a platform that we'd go and invest in. But we use this to say, hey, maybe this distribution or that distribution is less popular. That's a place that we, can prioritize away from our testing efforts. And so what we do here with the transparency is you get to look right into our source code and find out what we're collecting, right? Everything is right there. There's no secret key logger. We're not looking at your scripts. We're not looking at your module names. There's things like very careful to have an allow list of module names. If you load a module, we want to count that so we know that you're using, say, Azure PowerShell. But if your module is not in that allow list, right? If you have your my company name .management, there's no way we're getting a hold of that, right? And you can see that right in the source code that's what's happening. And of course, we publish that data. So if you go to AKMS/PS GitHub BI, you could see exactly what we know, what data we're tracking and how we're using that to drive decisions in the product.
Yeah, a lot of people were concerned about that whole telemetry thing, and I think the team just did a fantastic job about being super clear about why we're collecting the data. Collect the data so that we can serve you better. Full stop. Again, we're not making revenue, we're not selling ads, etc. And then here is the data. You have the source code so you can see exactly what we're picking up, and the telemetry. That's what we're looking at, so you can see it too. So being completely forthright, I think, really helps stem some of the concerns about what's going on here. So you guys played that really well.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
All right, PowerShell 7.1. So we really released this in November of 2020, and that's supported for about a year. Okay, from release. This was built upon .NET version 5, and it's everywhere, right? And so one of the great things about this version is now you can go to the store. So I don't know if you've tried that. You go to the Windows Store and type PowerShell, and you can now download it from the Windows Store. We started to do that with 7.1. So crazy cool stuff. And really, this is the case. We talk about it here in 7.1, but really it was in 6.0 and just a whole open source effort. It's just we have so many community contributions. I got to tell you, it's the thing I love the most about PowerShell. I think it's one of those transformative things. Open it up to the community. There were always this like edge feature, like, oh, it should do this, but we're busy doing that. Oh, it really should do this. Oh, but we got to go do this. And the community was able to come in and provide just a ton of small, medium, and large features that just flush it out in ways that really matter to the community. So it's again one of my favorite features. And then this is where we start first introducing the intelligent, and predictive IntelliSense. And I think we're going to talk some more about that a little bit later. So let's talk about the telemetry.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting pair of graphs here. So on the left side, we're actually, and this is, the telemetry you see up on PS GitHub BI includes both the PowerShell Core 6 and the PowerShell 7 data. We have started to summarize some of this more historically so that we've got a little longer term horizon, but that's really only for the PowerShell 7 data, right? So what you're seeing here is purely PowerShell 7 and why there might be a little mismatch with the data that you see out in the public. But on the left side, we have sort of unique nodes of PowerShell, right? So you can think of these as individual machines, VMs, containers, basically unique systems that may run a number of different sessions. And on the right side, we have the PowerShell sessions, right? So this is every time you start up a PowerShell, a pwsh.exe instance, we add a little +1 to this graph. So what's really interesting here is that, we had Linux dominant usage in terms of our sessions on the right side for a very long time. And recently we crossed over the threshold where, now you're seeing about 50% of usage coming from Windows. And I think some of the reason for this is, as Jeffrey was saying, a lot of the stuff that you could do with Windows PowerShell 5.1, there wasn't a lot that got added there for PowerShell Core 6 and for Windows users. So people were saying, well, Windows PowerShell is working fine for me. I don't really see a need to upgrade yet. And as PowerShell 7 has sort of matured and brought back a lot of that compatibility, I think you see a lot of people recognizing that the additional value that's there in PowerShell 7 is worth it now that they know they don't have to take a step backwards, from where they were with Windows PowerShell. So, I think this just really points to the fact that, the maturity is caught up and that the Windows user base is really, embracing PowerShell 7. But on the left side, you see the overwhelming majority of these machines are Linux nodes, right? So this points to the fact that I think that the Linux world has rapidly embraced containerization. You have a lot more ephemeral machines. Machines get torn down much quicker, whereas Windows machines tend to be, either longer running bare metal machines or VMs. Those machines, have a longer life cycle potentially, and so multiple, sessions are getting run within the same node. Could also be a lot of dev boxes, a lot of, individual user machines where they're starting up a lot of their own sessions. So, it's just interesting to sort of see this trend play out between OSs. But, we have a number of really interesting facts. Over 50% of PowerShell 7 sessions are running in Docker, right? Which really points to how powerful it is that we have these container images available for folks. As we said, Windows just caught up to and barely surpassed Linux sessions, but Windows still represents less than 10% of the nodes, right? So people are running, 5 to 20 sessions on an individual Windows node, whereas, they may just spin up a Linux machine to just run a workload and then, get rid of that thing.
Yeah, it's amazing the things, we collect a bunch of data, but there's a bunch of data that we don't have. And so often we're like, wow, that number on Linux is so huge. Who's doing what with that thing? And then, of course, we don't collect that information, so we don't know. But Joey, I was wondering, when people get, fully get their COVID vaccines, will we be able to ask Bill Gates what those people are doing?
I don't believe so, Jeffrey. I'm not privy to that sort of information, but as far as I know,
Doesn't everybody get a microchip now with the vaccine? Never mind.
the 5G and the
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so no, I mean we would love to have that information. And please, if you are one of those users who are the millions and millions of Linux sessions that we see spike up and down occasionally, please let us know, because we'd love to do things for you that you need us to do. But no, we would, myself, Jeffrey, the entire team, every one of my managers, they would all love to know, what these workloads are, but we really don't know. And that's for the sake of your privacy. So another really interesting fact here, 25% roughly of PowerShell 7 users are already on 7.1, which is awesome given that we only just shipped that at the beginning of this year. Really tells us that folks are able to move forward. We're really excited to see how 7.2 plays out in terms of the sort of adoption curve there, given that it's going to be an LTS. About 25% of PowerShell 7 sessions load Azure PowerShell. So this is just really, really interesting that, we did expect, a lot of folks to be doing cloud management. PowerShell 7, I think, has really been adopted as a tool for cloud management. We can't know, because of that allow list, how many folks are using AWS tools or VMware tools or Google tools, but it's probably a good amount. But interestingly, there's a pretty significant chunk. Unfortunately, I don't have this exact number. It's probably in the 10 to 20% as well. But there's a lot of folks that don't use any modules beyond what is built into PowerShell, which tells us that PowerShell is really useful just as a scripting and orchestration language for, like we said, .NET applications. Potentially you're building, testing, deploying .NET applications using native utilities, right? I don't know how many of you have ever tried to write a bash script that was longer than 30 or 40 lines. I love bash, I used it for years, but when it comes to robust scripting capabilities, it can be a lot more challenging to manage, complex control flow, even just executing native applications. So that's really something that, I found fascinating. And then with the VS Code extension, about 50% of users are still on Windows PowerShell, which is both an awesome, on the one hand, could seem a little disappointing, like, oh, we really want users moving up to PowerShell 7. But on the other hand, it tells us that there's so much value in the VS Code extension that even folks that still use Windows PowerShell have moved away from the ISE and are embracing the VS Code extension. So, just because you're maybe not a PowerShell 7 fan today doesn't mean that you can't use the VS Code extension and gain a lot of value out of that. Similarly, if we just back up really quick to this original slide, you'll notice that Mac OS is in the legend here, and yet it's virtually imperceptible in the graph, right?
Yeah, good point.
So why is that? Well, generally Mac OS is not running servers, right? You don't have really at scale cloud workloads where you're deploying tons of machines, from a Mac OS box, or you're running your Mac OS CI, and so you don't see that at scale automation. But when I go to a conference, PowerShell Summit, generally, if I look around, about half the machines have an Apple logo on them, right? Which means that Mac OS is still a critical authoring environment, right, for developers and DevOps and IT professionals to author their scripts and deploy them up to the cloud. And that's why, coming back to these statistics, when we look at VS Code, right, about 13% of users are Mac OS users using the VS Code extension, which would absolutely show up on that other graph. Awesome. And so, it's really, just another way that we maintain our commitment to Mac OS, despite the fact that if we just looked at the node and session telemetry, we might say this platform isn't important enough for us to invest in. So really quick, PowerShell 7.2, it's already cranking. We're already on preview 4, possibly even preview 5 by the time you're watching this recording. It's tentatively scheduled for the end of this year. We are right there with .NET now. And so, we shipped within 24 hours of their last release, and we plan to do the same, maybe even, within 6 hours of the .NET 6 release that this is built on top of.
Yeah, it's really a little behind the scene baseball on that. It used to be they'd release, and then how long would it take us? Like 6 weeks, 4 weeks?
Like sometimes 3 months, 4 months.
Oh,
I mean, it could, it was dependent on, we'd sort of work back and go, oh, maybe they made this change in the late days, and so we got to match that change with more changes. And we are so partnered with them now.
Yeah. And so what do we do to get it so we can be so agile?
We speak more often. We're pulling preview builds on a more consistent basis. We've got some automation that's doing its best to keep up with their established builds and to test some of their nightlies. You know, we just work hand in hand in feeding some of our requirements into them, making sure that you know, they test us to some extent by virtue of the fact that they're pulling into their PS Core SDK container or their .NET SDK container. So you know, all of us are testing each other's bits with each other, and that allows us to be highly confident when we come out after 2 release candidates to say, hey, on this day we're all going to just release together. And what that does, you know, it's not just nice for people that like to get the latest bits, but it also means that we're maximizing the amount of time that you are in a supported build, right? So if we ship the same day, that 3 years that .NET guarantees for an LTS, you're going to get every day of those 3 years using PowerShell 7 too, which is going to be an LTS as well.
And again, this is one of the things I love about the team. The team is willing to go do these hard, dirty, tough engineering tasks.
Yeah, that was not easy. Yeah.
And there's no glory, like, oh, you know, no celebration. Oh, it's like, but it delivers customer value. And again, that's what I just love about the team, just so focused in on customer value. So
yeah, we turn over to Richard Lander on the .NET team and give him a high five, and that's, you know, that's our glory right there. But that's enough for me. His high fives are worth a lot. So, you know, the release here, we're really focused again on shell improvements. A lot of this predictive intelligence stuff, we're going to show stability. But, you know, a lot of the innovation that we're doing is actually happening outside of PowerShell. And this is really a theme across the organization for the, you know, our GitHub organization across the PowerShell team, is that, you know, we really got to make sure that this platform is stable, right? It's been out for a long time. The usage is in the, you know, 100 million a month sessions. This is not something that we can just break on people. And what that means is, you know, we really are looking to do a lot of the new shiny stuff outside of PowerShell and new modules. These may find their way into PowerShell, but we want to make sure that we stabilize them and that you know, things are working good. People like these modules and that they really have high enough value to belong in PowerShell. So the age-old question, I get asked it more than any other.
Hey Joey, what about shipping in Windows?
Thank you, Jeffrey. Yeah, what about shipping in Windows? Well, we still have some support challenges, right? And .NET, given that .NET supports their LTS for about 3 years, we can't ship it in Windows and you know, adhere to the Windows support lifecycle of 5 years plus 5 years extended plus however long we're going with 2008 R2 on Azure. You know, these are strong commitments that we make when we say that we support a thing in an operating system. We support that major version in perpetuity for the remainder of that lifecycle. And, you know, that's not something that we can kind of bend the rules on. But we're going to make it easier than ever for you to pick it up, regardless of what version of Windows you're on. And in fact, in my opinion, decoupling the version of PowerShell from the version of Windows allows you to be able to stay more up to date on older versions of Windows where, you know, if we were shipping in the operating system, you may be sort of stuck on, you know, a potentially older build. So here, by shipping in the download catalog, we have servicing via Microsoft Update. This is, if you've ever used Windows Update, there's a little checkbox in your advanced settings that allows you to allow updates for other Microsoft products from Windows Update. And, you know, if you've got PowerShell 7 installed, that box is going to give you all the latest updates from PowerShell 7 right there in your Windows Update workflow. But this also means by shipping in the download catalog that we're compatible with all the download catalog tooling. So that means SCCM, Intune, WSUS. We know tons of you are still using these things on-prem, and there's lots of other third-party tooling that integrates directly with the download catalog. So we do believe by casting a wide net here, making it simpler to simply, you know, check a box, have PowerShell, you know, rev my compliance, make sure it's up to date, run my Windows Update, that you can just have the latest version of PowerShell, and be confident that you know, you're not on some older version that maybe was baked into, you know, 3 years ago version of the OS that you're still on.
Indeed.
So also talking about working groups a little bit. So this is a concept. These are essentially subcommittees within open source where, you know, we want to make decisions in issues and pull requests. So, you know, going into the implementation of these things, we had a few goals. We recognized we were having some challenges in the open source project. One of those is that we weren't scaling well in terms of our issue and pull request triage, right? Even if you pop open GitHub right now, we have a lot of open pull requests and a lot of issues. And a lot of these are not, you know, being actively sort of communicated, right? We're not reviewing every single one of these pull requests right this second, or these issues, and they come in and maybe, you know, community members have some conversations about those without any of the PowerShell team members around. So we really wanted a way to scale this better. I also wanted to accelerate the decision-making process. You know, we found that we were taking a very long time, even once these things were triaged, to actually make a final call on it and say, hey, this is going to come in, or this is, you know, not going to be able to come in. And then we're also noticing that a lot of this, you know, sort of holdup was due to the bottleneck of the PowerShell committee, right? So we meet for a couple hours every single week. We talk about a lot of these things, and many of us, you know, have other responsibilities in our day jobs. And so because of that, we found ourselves being kind of the bottleneck and the slowdown for this decision making, and we wanted to delegate some of our authority out to other people so that we could unblock some of these things that were coming in. So the overall flow of this new working group process, where we've got these subcommittees, is at a very high level. This is a little more complex under the hood, but at a very high level. Can it be done outside of PowerShell? Right? If yes, if you can go build a module today that's going to support this functionality, you should go build it, right? And if it's really awesome and everyone loves it, and it really just needs to be in the image because even before I load PowerShell I need this thing to be there for these bootstrap scenarios, then you can propose at that point, hey, I want to bring this into PowerShell. But until then, go build it outside of PowerShell. Maybe we can contribute, maybe we'll use it. But we really don't want to add additional surface area to PowerShell itself, which is already a fairly large package and is very expensive for us to maintain.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, how we actually want to go the opposite direction. I
Yes.
used to say this, and when we were doing the refactoring of Windows for Nano Server, and the best operating system in the world has only one function, and that is load optional component, right? If you want to remove an optional component, you got to load that first, right? But anyway, that it's the smallest thing, and then you bring in only the things you need. So indeed, we want to push more and more things out of PowerShell.
Absolutely. So after we've gotten a no to that question, this thing it's a language feature in PowerShell. We can only do it in PowerShell. Then, we've got a series of heuristics that we use here, right? And obviously, you can answer no to some of these and still potentially make it in. But generally speaking, a yes to each of these questions is going to contribute to more success. So those questions are, is this a valuable thing, right? Is it useful in the real world? Is this actually going to reduce the energy per answer for people in real world scenarios? Is it non-breaking, right? Is maybe this is a great feature that we should have done from day one, but if every script out there in the world is going to be broken as a result of this change, that's probably not something that we can do because we're committed to the stability of the platform over the long haul. Does it have a large audience, right? This might be very, very valuable for you, but if it's not valuable for anybody else, well, then it's probably not something that we want to contribute to the surface area. And is it a trivial change, right? If this is, oh man, this makes so much sense. It's one new parameter. Yeah, we should have had this on day one. No problem. Go ahead and ship it in, right? All those yeses are going to contribute to more success. But in some cases where those things are non-trivial, maybe there are some breaking changes or some different design implications that need to be discussed by the committee or in a larger forum, we're going to push, hey, write an RFC, write one of these design specifications, and then also ship as an experimental feature first, right? So what's an experimental feature? Basically, it means that we fence, that new code. We turn it on by default in preview builds and then off by default in stable builds, right? So we introduce a feature. If you're one of those people out there using previews, you know that occasionally things might break for you. And if we get a lot of reports of those breakages, or people say this feature doesn't work like I expected it to, then we can revise it or we can choose to remove it altogether, right? And that really allows us to experiment and play with these new features without necessarily committing to the idea that they're definitely going to be in PowerShell after that RFC gets written.
And that works out really well. A lot of times, we talk about these things and it's like, but then when you actually code it, right, and you use it, you're like, I see. Like that's really valuable, or really valuable if, or not so much.
Yeah, and you see this in the open source project. People, will sort of wax poetic about all the sort of theoretical implications of a potential change. But at the end of the day, when you code it up and you try it, you go, oh, well, that didn't do what I thought it was going to do. Oh, no, you can't do that. Let's try a different way, right? And that is so much more useful and gets to that sort of conclusion so much faster, which is why we really push for that experimentation. So we plan to be reaching out to some top contributors soon, because while these working groups today are comprised entirely of folks on the PowerShell team, the goal here is to scale out, not just to rearrange the amount of work that we're doing. And so we really want to engage with those people that are experts in certain areas in PowerShell and help sort of deputize them as people that can help make some of these decisions for us.
Yeah, it's the way I kind of view this, Joey. I was thinking about this earlier this morning. Is that whether it was open source, whether it was putting things in modules, whether it's refactoring this, whether it's refactoring the way we work with the community, step by step, it's like adding more lanes to the highway, and that's the trick, right? How do we keep allow more things to get done safely instead of just having a single thread?
Right. Yeah. Parallelization is a powerful multiplier.
Indeed. All right, so I want to talk about PSARM. I love this thing. So I don't know how many of you have used ARM templates, but when they first came out, I looked at them and I was like, hey, Mark, that's pretty freaking ugly. Would you like us to help you? And he's like, what are you talking about? It's beautiful. And I was like, okay. Anyway, so, and I just looked at it, I was like, oh man, that's horrible. I called this baby ugly, unfortunately. Anyway, so then sort of years went by, you didn't think that was a good idea. And then at some point, guess what? The community's like, hey, you know what? This thing's kind of ugly. And so we started a project on something we call Bicep, and that sort of opened us up to doing PSARM, because we said, yeah, hey, Bicep is another flavor of a purely declarative approach to doing an ARM template. But well, two things. One is I just disagree with that approach. I believe at the end of the day, all these declarative things, they all say, oh, purely declarative. And in the end, you end up with imperative code. And actually, if you take a look at the ARM templates, there's little islands of imperative code in there. And I just believe that PowerShell with our domain-specific languages has done a pretty good job of integrating imperative and declarative code. I think it's just the right model. The second thing was, we originally were going to do this a while ago. I was just sort of like, no, let's just do it. And frankly, a number of us were under the mistaken idea that we had to make core changes to our language engine to do better support domain-specific languages. And then Rob Holt and Steve Lee came about with an insight and said, no, actually you don't. If we did this, this, and this, it goes from an extra large thing with high risk of breaking things to a relatively small task with a very low thing. So, thank you, Rob. Thank you, Steve. Remember I said my thing I'm proudest of is creating an environment where geniuses can add their genius. That's what they did, man. They added their genius in a way that is coherent. So that's what the PSARM is. It is.
Do you want to take control here? Just make sure I.
Oh, I thought I did.
Yeah. No, sorry.
I'm advancing it for myself. That is not helping you, is it? Okay. So it is a mixture of imperative and declarative code, right? So you get loops, you get pipelines, you get conditionals. Instead of having a literal, you can look something up in SQL, you can look something up in AD, you can talk to VMware, ask them their opinion about things, whatever you want. You get the code from wherever it is, construct it however you want to, but it's also then declarative, right? And ultimately then renders into an ARM template. So it's very similar to Terraform or to Bicep. And I want to be clear here, use the tool that makes you successful, right? Again, we're not after your revenue. We don't get any revenue for PowerShell. Whatever tool makes you successful, people would often like, oh, why should I use PowerShell over this? I'm already being successful with that. It's like, go with God. If you're being successful, that's happy days. I think that we have an opportunity to do a better job. And so I think you ought to consider this. And a lot of things we call our sacred vow, we do them because of our sacred vow, which is a lot of you have invested in learning PowerShell. And if you want to go invest and learn a new tool, that's great. But that tool, everything you spent, all the time you spend on that new tool doesn't help you with your PowerShell. Any advances we make in PowerShell doesn't help you with that new tool. So we were really very cognizant of this like broken ecosystem problem. That's why we invest in the sacred vow. So if you want to leverage your PowerShell skills and get some great stuff to it. So again, as we improve PowerShell, you get benefits of this. So again, you have Bicep, you have Terraform, happy days. How do they handle secrets? Yeah, that's going to be a problem. Well, guess what? PowerShell, we got secrets management. Use PSARM, just use secrets management to go grab those secrets and plug them in here. So that's the benefit of the approach we're taking. Now, here's an example. Looks a little complicated, right? So the idea here is that this is a function, and at the bottom you'll see there's a new commandlet, publish PSARM template, and you give it a script, okay? In the script, new storage, and then there's a new extension, right? So it's got to be .psarm.ps1. So it's a PowerShell script, but you put that PSARM in there to tell us it's a PSARM script, okay? And then you give it a set of parameters. Now here, then how do you write these things? And the answer is PowerShell, right? It's PowerShell, okay? So this is a function. It has a set of parameters. Those parameters you can say are mandatory, not mandatory, default values, etc. Anything you want, it's a PowerShell function. But then you have this domain-specific language, right? ARM. And what does it take? It takes a script block. Oh, you mean code? Yeah, code. Okay, so ARM and this thing. And now notice it says for each. So wait, so now I've got imperative code. So start off declarative ARM, and then I have imperative code for each $log in location. And then what? Another declarative function, resource. storage name, blah, 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 and then what ARM SKU you want, and then what the properties are. And then, we'll have IntelliSense that supports all this, so you can auto predict these things, etc. But if you look at it, it's pretty clear to understand, nice declarative. You'll see similar things in the other tools, etc. The difference is here is that for each, right? You can put conditionals in here. You can look information up from wherever you want. And so we think that this mixture of imperative and imperative. By the way, so what's happening here is you're creating storage accounts in multiple locations. So what I did at the bottom here is I said, hey, I want a new storage account in locations US West and US East. So it's going to create two. And so you'll see how with fairly pithy code and imperative loops, conditionals, etc., you can get very rich and complex ARM templates. So I'm just thrilled about this work. And again, hats off to the geniuses, Rob and Steve, and the others that contributed for that kind of keen insight that allowed us to go implement this.
Thank you, Jeffrey. And I would caveat to people, yes, if you run that, some things will happen that are you get some errors and stuff. There's missing a name that's a mandatory parameter and stuff like that. But we're just trying to demonstrate the what's going on there. If you go out to the PSARM repository today on the PowerShell GitHub repo, Rob and Danny Martins have written a number of awesome examples that are both very long and very short that'll demonstrate all kinds of different scenarios to how to use PSARM. So definitely check that out. So here we're talking about predictive IntelliSense a little bit. I'm just going to barely tease this one because there is an awesome session from Jason Helmick and Damian Caro going way into detail with this, but we just are so excited about this we couldn't help ourselves to show a little bit here. But basically, predictive IntelliSense is tab completion that knows what you want to type before you type it, right? So if you look here at this picture, all that's actually been typed by the user is get-ch, right? The entire rest of that command has been pulled from a predictive plugin that suggests this command to you. And if I were to hit the right arrow or whatever keyboard shortcut you have it configured as, I'm just going to get the whole rest of that command. So it's like tab completion on a single token, but for the entire command string, which is just way cool. Now, there's a number of these different prediction plugins. Today, we have history built right in. So if you see here, this is actually coming directly out of my PS readline history file. If you get -PS readline option, you can see where that's stored. People even go put it in their OneDrive so that it syncs up across multiple machines and they have a single shared history. Some people don't want that. You can set it up however you want. But it's actually going to go into your history, similar to how Control-R would search through your history. But I've got a list view here that actually shows me, hey, these are all of the things that match what you're currently typing. And, I can use, arrow keys to select which one of those I want to use. And so, when I use 3 or 4 things that start with the same few letters, but I do those 3 or 4 different things all the time, this is awesome for that.
Yeah, and I've been using this, and then Jason had pointed out, I was going back and you select something, and then you can go back and modify things. And Jason's like, why are you doing it that way? There's all these nice accelerators to switch between the arguments of the command line to modify things. It's well worth taking a few minutes to learn this. It's so cool.
And go through their sessions because it's there are so many little features and awesome little tidbits of this. But similarly, we've got this Azure PowerShell plugin, right? And this is where Damian Caro comes in, and this is just way cool that Azure has built this machine learning module that actually is able to suggest best practice Azure PowerShell commands based on documentation, Stack Overflow examples, a whole gamut of data sources that they've used here. Or Stack Overflow type. I don't know if it was actually in the data set or whatever, but the some kind of examples. But we've pulled from all over the place, and so you've got these commands here that will suggest to you like hey, I see that you're wanting to do a new AZ VM. These are the parameters that you should use, and here's some dummy values for the parameter values and that sort of thing. We're even looking into like, hey, you use a subscription ID up there. We're going to autofill that subscription ID on your next suggestion for your next command because you're probably still using the same subscription ID as you go through. Just way cool, work smarter, not harder kind of stuff. So definitely check out az.predictor and their session. So this was a little secret one that we were talking about. Jeffrey, do you want to hop in on this one?
Yeah, sure. So this is minimal PowerShell. So I kind of mentioned that earlier. And the idea again was this idea that the best operating system or the best PowerShell is one that has exactly one function: load optional component. And the reason for that is that it allows us to go into environments that are very, very small. So think Raspberry Pi, think HoloLens, think there's lots of scenarios that we've been public about, lots of scenarios that we haven't been public about, where they need to say, hey, space is at a premium. And if I'm not using it for my scenario, I don't want it to be part of the system. And so that's the idea here. And then we won't get to the point where it's, load optional package is the only thing that's the starting block. But we do want to make it as small as possible. And the idea here is to then take these various subsystems and to decouple them. Break out the utility commandlets, break out PS readline, break out the help, break out remoting. One of the ideas was, hey, right now you have remoting and you get all the remoting, SSH, WinRM, et cetera. But what if I don't, if I've fully converted over to SSH, why am I still loading all that WinRM code? And the idea is like, hey, can we break that into subsystems? Again, with the idea that says, I bring in only the things that I want to, and then pick up everything else through the gallery. Back to this idea of adding more swim lanes, right? Or lanes to the highway, as it were. The degree to which I have to make a change in remoting and I have to change it in the mainline PowerShell means that you got to coordinate with the PowerShell team. You got to have, sync everything up, et cetera. Why not just say, hey, let's create a new swim lane for remoting and just go as fast as the wind? And so that's what this allows us to do. And again, this does not necessarily mean that you get an overly complex environment. If you think about the AZ module, right, you say import module AZ, and because we have nested modules, that AZ module is in fact an umbrella module that then says bring in all these other things. And so for you, you just say get AZ module, and then a little bit later, you've got all the other modules. So the same idea will be, hey, whether it's we pre-configured a container or we pre-configure a module, you'll then import something that'll bring in your most commonly used subsets. So that's where we're going with minimal PowerShell.
Yeah, just to clarify a little bit, Jeffrey, this is something that very, very early days. We're still figuring out how this is going to work. One of the things that we've started on here is the remoting transport pluggability. So there's been folks out there that have wanted to plug in other remoting subsystems beyond WinRM and SSH. So, it's not just expanding the number of lanes for the PowerShell team to operate in, but for the entire community to operate in, so that, things that maybe we're, less willing to merge into the official PowerShell branch can still get plugged in just the same as any other low-level component. But also, I want to point out that this is not something where we're going to go and get rid of the traditional PowerShell package, right? We know that there are folks out there that need the kitchen sink. We're committed to the stability. This is really something that is going to be in addition to what you see today. And we still see a lot of value in having that sort of all-in-one package.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so again, PowerShell version 7, hopefully you've seen through the conversation today, it really is about managing everything everywhere, right? And this is really about empowering every person and organization in the world to achieve more, whether you're Windows, whether you're a VMS customer, whether you're on-prem, whether you're cloud, you like Azure, I like AWS, I like Google. Whatever it is, we want to help you be successful. That's it. We want to help you be successful. And again, that's why we have these, PowerShell community calls. If there's something that we're doing that we're missing, we definitely want to hear from you. We think we're doing all the right things, but always open to hearing where we can do better. Because why? Are we there yet? Again, we think that we've given you stuff and you can do anything with what we've given you, right? Return complete. But back to this energy per answer. How can we make it so that your life is easier, that you can do things one step instead of two, with more simplicity, with better supportability? How can we help you be the hero of your company? How can we help you develop tools to provide other people power and simplicity? So that's where we're going with this. So we got a bunch of great sessions here today. Encourage you to go to all these. We talked about the one, but we've got Secrets Management with Paul and Sydney. We're going to do the how to do a pull request, going from a pull request to a release. We'll talk about Crescendo. Is that the name? Yeah, Crescendo, where we're able to take PowerShell and wrap native commandlets to give high-level task-oriented abstractions to native executables. And then how to get from PowerShell API from .NET, NuGet APIs from PowerShell Get, readline, predictive IntelliSense, dynamic help, awesome stuff, and then desired state configuration. So lots of great sessions here today. And with that, I think we have some time for some questions.
So now we will cut to us now in the future, where we can't wait to answer your questions. So and obviously after we're done with that, have a great session or summit, everyone. We're really looking forward to attending many of these other sessions, and just really excited for an awesome conference. So thanks, everybody.